they do these things to basically just get our numbers in there, but then they don't deliver. So it's like, all right, what do we do at this point to really get people to actually give a damn when we're put in those positions?
We build up networks like LATV so we can have our own.
True. That's true.
At the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to. And then we do have our little station, Univision and Telemundo, but even those stations are problematic and not inclusive.
Right.
So then maybe the solution is to create your own inclusive, fully Latino station that understands the nuances of Latinidad and can serve the many different groups that fall under the Latino umbrella.
What up? It's Dramos, and this is the first episode of the recap from 2022. Happy New Year. So good to be back breaking down some of the biggest headlines from this last week. My guest helped me break it all down is actually my LATV family. Melany Centeno, host of Blacktinidad here on LATV, is going to be hopping on with me in just a little bit. Before that, though, man, let's get into some of the BS from this last week. Now, this last week, it marked the 1-year anniversary of a very dark day in our country, and that is, of course, the attempted coup that happened at the Capitol on January 6th of last year. And that was, for anybody not familiar or anybody who needs a refresher, that was when a bunch of Donald Trump stans turned terrorists decided they would riot and try to stop the certification of an election that Donald J. Trump, in fact, lost. Yeah, shocker there, right? Now, regardless of what some hack media outlets and little TikTok experts try to say, Donald Trump lost. I mean, that is a cold, hard fact. But like any spoiled brat who's had everything in his life handed to him, Trump just couldn't accept the reality. And instead of leaving with some sort of grace, he decided that, you know what? He's going to create the big lie instead, right? A lie that tells people that the election was stolen, right? And for those of you following along at home, just a friendly reminder, Donald Trump had his day in court, multiple courts actually, and couldn't produce any real evidence that actually proves some sort of widespread voter fraud that would actually affect the outcome of the election. And actually, in typical kind of Donald Trump taking an L fashion, when the recount happened that Donald Trump requested, which, by the way, ended up costing him and his stans $3 million of campaign money, this recount that Donald Trump requested actually turned up even more votes for Joe Biden. Yes, shocker. Joe Biden won. I'm sorry to break it to you, Donald Trump stans. He lost. Move on, right? I mean, we all did the same thing when Donald Trump got put into office. It is what it is. Now, let's continue on this conversation, right? Like, Donald Trump, in doing this little recount and doing his little nonsense about election fraud, all he did was further prove that his claims were, in fact, baseless, and he essentially further cemented his legacy as a fraud, a narcissist, and a failure, right? But while the human cheese doodle that is Donald Trump, you know, he's gotten to go back and escape to his little resort in Florida, the rest of us American citizens, have been left to pick up the pieces and come to the harsh realization that the actions of a spoiled man-child and his cronies have in fact left our very democracy hanging on by a thread. And to me, the only way for us to begin to heal and to repair this country is to hold these treasonous traitors, because that's in fact what they are. That's what these rioters were, and hold them accountable for the January 6th insurrection. And to give credit where credit is due, it has been really enjoyable just kind of sitting back and watching as the January 6th committee have been making these text messages between Donald Trump and his little pen pals public. But the reality is we do need more than just public shaming. We need actual punishment. And to date, of the 725 people arrested for storming the Capitol, only 71 have actually received criminal sentences. Now, to be fair, some trials are still ongoing, but generally speaking, it seems to me like most of these terrorists, these domestic terrorists, are just getting away with a slap on the wrist, which to me, again, beyond the realm of comprehension. How? How, Sway? Now, these people tried to overtake the government. Like, you realize that? They tried to overtake the government and put the lives of some of the most important people in this country at risk, all in the name of destroying democracy as we know it. Now, understand that we live in a country that, generally speaking, seems to only enjoy handing down harsh sentencing when it's on people of color, but enough is enough. If we don't send a message this time, we'll leave ourselves with no options but to watch our country burn to the ground when this inevitably happens again. And to Biden's credit, I have to give him some credit here. During his speech on the anniversary of January 6th last week, he was talking that talk.
The former president of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's done so because he values power over principle, because he sees his own interest as more important than his country's interest, than America's interest.
Woo! Okay, that's that spicy talk that we need. Like, stop trying to be everyone's friend and call these idiots out on their nonsense. And now, listen, admittedly, I've been a Biden skeptic, but it seems like he may have finally grown a backbone, and at a time when we need it the most. And for that, I'm coming out of this BS feeling a bit optimistic. Now, with that said, help me break down the rest of the headlines from this last week. My guest is LATV family. She hosts Blacktinidad right here on LATV. She is a professional dancer and actress on top of that. Melany Centeno, how we feeling? It's good to see you.
Hey, how you doing? I'm good.
I'm good. Happy New Year while it's still acceptable to say Happy New Year.
Why would it not be acceptable to say Happy New Year?
Because, there's like that time period where it's like, okay, like it's already the new year. You got to get over saying Happy New Year to people. You know what I mean? So there's like that weird in-between stage where it goes on for too long.
Oh, I see. I think for me, I don't give a f*** if I saw you in May. If I haven't seen you in December, I'm going to say Happy New Year.
Oh, see, that's a little extra right there. If it's already like the middle of the year, you got to save that for next year. Hopefully you get them at the top of next year.
But yeah, Happy New Year.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wanna get into your show as well and kind of put people onto that who aren't familiar. Before that, though, let's kind of touch on some of these current events that have happened, since we've been on a little bit of this break, if it's cool with you.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, obviously, we started with New Year's. Let's first and foremost, do you have a New Year's resolution that you have made for yourself this year?
I don't do New Year's resolutions.
Okay. What's the purpose behind? I know some people, don't mess with New Year's resolutions. What's your mindset for that?
I find that like you make a New Year's resolution and then you might stick to it for a couple of weeks. Like it's kind of redundant to always every year have a goal set for yourself that you don't necessarily follow through with.
Sure.
So for me, I just generally have goals. Mm-hmm. And then I break my goals up into smaller goals.
Yep.
And then wherever they fall on the timeline, they're going to fall on the timeline. And if they happen to fall in the new year.
Right.
And if they don't, because I think also we use like this New Year as a new beginning, and I get it, but like time doesn't work that way. Sure.
I mean,
so it doesn't matter when you start your resolutions or whenever you can decide in May, and it doesn't matter if you started in January.
Right. No, I mean, that makes sense. It sounds to me first and foremost that you're just a big fan of the month of May. Also, that's like your reference point.
It's gonna be May.
I mean, well, I get what you say. First of all, I break my goals down in the same way as you. Like break them all down until I give you a big goal and you make them smaller and smaller and smaller. I do put timelines on them as far as like 3, 6 a year and then 5-year goals as well. That's kind of how I do it. But I do get what you say about the New Year's resolutions. But I think that the problem is that people often try to make this like grand New Year's resolution, right? Where like to me, it's a lot more effective if you're just kind of like, listen, I'm going to try to eat healthier this year, right? Maybe your goal is to like get in shape and become a bit of a healthier human being. So to me, if you set a little bit more of like a broad goal that's a little less specific, doesn't have a time period on it, and it's very easy to like, maybe you eat just a couple extra salads than you did the year before, you've achieved that goal of eating a bit healthier than last year. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, but also that's reductive. Like, you could set a goal like, oh, I want to eat healthier. And then you've eaten a few salads and then all of a sudden, like you've eaten healthier, but not necessarily like if you want to eat healthier, then you have to put in the time and the research to realize, okay, how am I eating that's unhealthy? Mm-hmm. What are the parts of my diet that I can remove? Yeah. What are the things that I can replace? And then do that continuously to then eat healthier, because you're never just going to eat healthier by just introducing a few things into your diet. Like you have to then make it a part of your lifestyle. So it has to be continuous effort to always eat healthier. You get what I mean? Like,
I get it. Yeah.
Like there's still no point to it unless like you're very specific. Yeah. If your New Year's resolutions are SMART goals, right? Mm-hmm. Specific, timely, attainable. I forget all the names in the acronym. But
all the adjectives.
Goals. Yeah. You're going to make SMART resolutions, fine.
Sure.
But if you're just going to make a general resolution and then be like, oh, yeah, so I went to the gym in January.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, you got to have follow through in life. You know what I'm saying? Like life is all about follow through. I just think that often what makes us procrastinate is that we get caught up on the idea of how big the idea is. You know what I'm saying? Like the idea, because like, everything you're saying, like kind of scares the shit out of me where you're like, yo, it's a lifestyle set. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's easy to be like, oh my God, I can't do this because it's so difficult to get this done. So I understand what you're saying. You got to follow through. I'm just saying, I think if you make it a little simpler, you're eventually going to probably fall into this place of like, yo, I ate 5 salads. Let me try to make it 6. Let me go to the gym now. You know what I'm saying? It kind of at least gets the ball rolling a little bit, I feel like.
Yeah, to a degree. I feel that.
Okay.
It works for some people. It works for to each their own.
Sure.
To each their own. Whatever goals you set, whenever you're going to set the goals, just make sure that they're specific, attainable, timely, and that you have a plan to commit to whatever it is. Otherwise, like, don't even set a goal. Just live your life.
Fair enough. Okay, well, listen, let's talk about one of the New Year's celebrations that happened. I'm not sure if you were tuned into this one, but there was a lot of hype around New Year's Rockin' Eve specifically, at least as far as it goes in the Latin community, because they were doing what they were calling the first ever Spanish language New Year's countdown on like broadcast television. So they were going to be live from Puerto Rico, celebrating the 500th year of San Juan. You had Rosalind Sanchez hosting. You had Daddy Yankee, who was supposed to be guest hosting as well. But as with most things that are not planned by people of the culture, it fell a bit short of the expectations that we were promised. So I'm not sure if you first, before I get into all the details, if you had a chance to check this out.
I didn't have a chance to check it out. I had a very low-key New Year's. We watched the movie. We turned the movie off at 11:59 so we could count down. Okay. And then put the movie back on. So I didn't know what was going on in terms of, I did hear like some like chitter chatter on social media about this happening. Yeah. But
so, I mean, you didn't miss anything. You're probably better off for not having tuned in, because then you would have just been disappointed like I was. And my poor father just sitting at home miserable as a very proud Puerto Rican.
Exactly. But also, if you want to be proud Puerto Rican on New Year's, you're just going to have that proud Puerto Rican New Year's party. So it's either chill in the crib and do something low key, or be at the family party getting drunk with some heinies and some Corona about the Yankees and the Mets still. Like
that's true. But I also think that when it comes to media, when you talk about representation, when it's not, consistently across the board, moments like this are important when it comes to us having a seat at the table. And then when they go ahead and drop the ball, so just kind of like a short, story long of it all, they checked in maybe once or twice throughout the course of like the 3-hour broadcast, you know what I'm saying? And the whole time they're checking in with LA and doing performances out of Los Angeles, going back and forth between New York. and they just quickly mention Puerto Rico. And then the big finale, 11 p.m. here on the East Coast, is midnight there in Puerto Rico. They're supposed to have this big finale with Daddy Yankee performing and counting down. So Daddy Yankee performs. They start doing the countdown, and literally for much of the East Coast, the countdown, the broadcast gets cut at 3. So they don't even get to 1, and the New Year, it gets cut at 3 and goes to the 11 o'clock news. Like, it was like the most janky production. You could have had performances in Puerto Rico that they cut back and forth to. They didn't. It was just a big letdown. And it's once again, it's like, man, we can't get excited about things and think that it's finally our time to shine, because the people in power don't give a damn enough to give us the same resources. If it was like if it was Taylor Swift live from Nashville, would have been a completely different story. But because it's Puerto Rico and it's Daddy Yankee, they hyped it up and didn't actually deliver.
Yeah, trash. Big trash emoji.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't even know what to do. Like, do we keep getting our hopes up that at some point we begin to get because they do these things to basically just get our numbers in there, but then they don't deliver. So it's like, all right, what do we do at this point to really get people to actually give a damn when we're put in those positions?
We build up networks like LATV so we can have our own.
True. That's true.
At the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to. And then we do have our little station, Univision and Telemundo, but even those stations are problematic and not inclusive.
Right.
So then maybe the solution is to create your own inclusive, fully Latino station that understands the nuances of Latinidad and can serve the many different groups that fall under the Latino umbrella.
Right. I mean, I think that definitely is what I would hope for, but I would also simultaneously hope that we can also crack that barrier a little bit as well. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, when you talk about, where the money is, where the resources are, like, unfortunately, that's where it is. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, there's a beautiful thing when it comes to internet and all that kind of stuff, but it's also, I think it does a disservice to our culture to not have our stories told to a wider audience. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, growing up, what are the family dynamics that you see? It's like, it's always in Hollywood. The white family is universal for everybody, right? But if you have a show that's about black people, that's only for the black market, right? That's only for a black audience that you can market it to. And to me, that's a bit of a problematic thing. And whether we realize it or not, it bleeds into the way that people see people of color outside of even television, right? Because you've kind of been, I don't want to say brainwashed, but you've kind of been tricked into thinking this is the way the world works. And you kind of have, even those who aren't maybe necessarily blatantly racist, have this unknown sort of superiority just because of what they've seen on television, representation, and kind of the hierarchy that goes along with that.
Yeah, but also when you think about, and I think this is where we got to take a page from like Black media, right? Mm-hmm. Because what's going on in Black media right now is what needs to happen with Latino media. And maybe very different, obviously, because Latino is such a huge umbrella, right? Sure. And that's a problem in and of itself. Right. But like Black media right now is taking the reins. Mm-hmm. You have so many Black production companies coming up. Right. Black content is now universal content. Right. And there are a lot of Black shows, not just recently, like the Cosbys, sorry, Cosby, but the Cosbys, Wayne's World, like all these Wayne's other brothers, shows, Martin, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like these are Black shows that not only Black audiences watch, like everybody and their moms watch The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That was a Black show. Yeah. You get what I'm saying? So I think, yes, we do want to have the invitation into the room, but at the same token, maybe we need to make the stirs in our own water so that they realize that there is a market for this to then get invited into the room instead of always trying to appease to white media and white gatekeepers in media and then be upset because we're not seeing the results that we want, but we're not really making the waves the way that Black media is doing it. Like you take someone like Issa Rae. Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Insecure is not just, yes, it's a Black show, but everybody watches Insecure. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody watches Power. Mm-hmm. Not just Black people, but that's technically a Black show. Everybody watches Blackish, Grownish, everything else. I don't want to see the Brownish because I think it's probably going to be trash. But like everybody watches these shows. Yeah. And maybe what it requires is more solidarity amongst us to then get together, pool our funds, be more of an economic power to push forth the things that we want to see. And we're getting little trinkets here and there of things like for instance, Encanto that just came out. Finally, something got it right. Unfortunately, it had to be a cartoon.
Sure.
But boom, you see the numbers that Encanto made. Hopefully that'll like ting in somebody's ear and realize, oh, we need to make more inclusive content about Latinidad because this content obviously makes a lot of money.
Right. At the end of the day, money is the factor that speaks to these people, right? Like you're not gonna appeal to their sort of, their heart at the end of the day. They don't give a damn about it that much. But if you can give them some ways to make money, then they're all about celebrating us and our culture. But I think that's a great point. I think that I often say this where we can be our own worst enemy oftentimes, because we don't organize in a really helpful way. And obviously it's difficult because you talk about the diversity that happens within our community and there are different needs for different cultures within the whole, Latin umbrella. But I think that even when it comes to, bringing to light, when you see the violence of police against Latinos and things like that, right? Like we're not great at organizing in the same way that, the Black community has been. So I definitely agree with that. I think we have to get some people to really understand the value of building and coming together for the greater good of our community as a whole.
Yeah, but I think that also says a lot about how ununified we are as a people in general. Maybe that's what needs to start because Latinos are not unified.
Yeah.
Even if you think about the last election, they're like split, divided, conservative, liberal, right? Even if you think about Puerto Rico right now, every single place in Latin America is divided. And then even you think about what's going on with the racial reckoning that is happening in Latin America and Afro-Latinos asking for more visibilities, indigenous people asking for more visibility and all of these things. But then there's still issue with that. Or I'll say, for instance, I love the film In the Heights, but I saw the problem with the film.
Sure.
And I was very vocal about those issues. And everybody on that end of Latinidad is getting in my because I'm showing you the problem that exists within this film, even that the film is great. Right. And then that's the issue here, because then you're like, oh, Latinos always want to complain about something. No, but Latinos never want to really solve the problem at home. Yeah. So that these problems that are happening in media, because within Latinidad, there's too much division. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Solve the problems at home. Solve the racism, the anti-Blackness, the violence against indigenous people, the violence against homosexuals, transsexuals, like solve all these things in Latinidad. And then we can be one people, and then we can push forth those things.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I also think that a lot of it comes from the older generations where they're sort of, especially when they came here, immigrated to the States, a lot of their defense mechanism for survival was like, don't be seen, you know what I'm saying? Don't be heard, kind of stay quiet so that, we don't bring too much attention to ourselves. And I think that has kind of poisoned us a bit generationally, and you're seeing it changing a little bit with this new generation. But I think that that's kind of where that tug and pull exists, where you have people of that mindset, like, yo, we should just be happy to be here. We should just be happy to be somewhat a part of the conversation. And then you have another generation who's like, that, like, we should have an equal seat at the table, and that's where a lot of that tug and pull kind of comes from, I think, in our culture as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been passed down because I find a lot of these issues that I have or that I'm going back and forth with people. Yeah. Where they're having like a lot of cognitive dissonance about these issues are with millennials, are with people my age, right? So it's just like, I think there is like a habit of wanting to stay within these like traditional ways of thinking and being, especially that like Latinos are very traditional about a lot of things. And I think that we as a people just need to be more progressive in our thinking and more empathetic to the very many different experiences that happen in Latinidad. And then be in a place where you can just maybe not agree, but understand and accept.
Sure. Yeah.
And if that were to happen, bro, because for instance, a lot of Latinos are like very staunch Catholics or very strict Christians, right?
Right.
And that poses a lot of issues with the newer generation and the older generation.
Yep.
I'm a newer generation who's not religious.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a Christian. And I have a lot of issues with my Christian family members because they'll judge my lifestyle or they'll judge certain things about me. And then by doing so, they ostracize me. Yeah. And that is also reflective of what happens in Latinidad as well, right? Where, you know, you have all these traditional ways of thinking and being. And then when you have more progressive thinkers, you try to ostracize them from the group and dehumanize them instead of just saying, well, you are this way. I will accept you this way because you are still loved by this community. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. I think we are at like this awkward place of like, how much of the old tradition do we hang on to and how much kind of, you know, new mentality do we begin to develop, you know, without losing ourselves. And I think there's this weird balance that most people are probably trying to find. And obviously it's just gonna take time, as frustrating as it is. But these conversations are obviously incredibly important towards getting there, and maybe redirecting the way that certain people think. But I think what you said, empathy is like the way that we all need to be leading, empathy for one another and being able to kind of see each other's viewpoint, not from a place of judgment, but, you know, from a place of understanding, and genuine interest at the end of the day, I think. Yeah,
definitely. And I think also a lot of education, a lot of re-education.
Right.
Because there's so much miseducation in our communities. And it causes, for those of us who are educated about a lot of these issues so that we try to have these conversations to get to one accord, it causes a lot of emotional trauma to us to always educate people in our families and our immediate friends who have a lot of these traditional ways of thinking that are actually very divisive. And then in turn, they'll tell us that we're being divisive by, you know, trying to re-educate them so that they can see the bigger picture. Because once you do see the bigger picture, then we can be on one accord. Otherwise, we're always going to be like, you know?
Yeah, fighting like cats and dogs. I think that's a great way to put it. Okay, so let's kind of close out on some positivity a bit. Okay, so we've been going ham on some of the negative aspects of things relating to our culture. So let's touch on this. This was a story that was really big, where you had the truck driver in Colorado who was sentenced to 110 years in prison for an accident that ended up killing 4 people. Now he has since been given a reduced sentence by the governor of Colorado, and he's been sentenced to 10 years now. And I'll read just a quick quote from the governor. He says, the length of your 110-year sentence is simply not commensurate with your actions, nor with penalties handed down to others for similar crimes. There is an urgency to remedy this unjust sentence and restore confidence in the uniformity and fairness of our criminal justice system. And consequently, I've chosen to commute your sentence now. And I just want to highlight this because I think, A, it's an important story, but B, shows you the power that we can have when we begin to use our voices, because this all happened because of the public outrage that happened online, right? Like the people that signed the petition, the millions of people that signed the petition, like all of this happened because of us unifying behind a cause. And there's just something so incredibly beautiful about that. And this just needs to be a lesson to us to continue to organize and get behind these different things, you know, as they inevitably happen.
Yeah. And I think that calls into, or that kind of shows and magnifies and puts like a magnifying lens on how when you get different groups to mobilize under one cause,
right?
Because I saw a lot of different types of, it wasn't just Latino outrage,
right? Yeah.
Right. It was Latino outrage, many different types of Latino outrage, right?
Sure.
Acknowledging that many types of Latinos exist.
Yeah.
It was Black outrage. It was white outrage.
Yep.
You know, really acknowledging the injustice of serving a sentence when you did something that was like not really in your control.
Sure. And
you have people who are committing crimes that was 100% in their control.
Right.
Serving this time. You know what I mean? And I think if we were to mobilize that way for all causes, If we were to unify that way for all causes, then we'd get a lot more done.
Yeah. No, that's a fact. And I think that you also brought up a great point of it wasn't just the Latin community, right? Like it was people collectively saying like, this is a human being, regardless of ethnicity, racial background, whatever the case may be, black, white, yellow. Like this is an atrocity and this needs to be stopped. Something needs to be done about it. And I think, that is kind of that empathy that we're all searching for and we all know is necessary to make the changes that we want to happen, in our communities and also in this country. So I think that's a really great point. And onto that token, the last thing I want to point out was the case of Vanessa Guillen, who was the soldier who was sexually harassed in Texas, then sadly ultimately was murdered. That Biden has actually signed an act called the Vanessa Guillen Act. And under this new law, the decision to prosecute sexual assault and sexual harassment in the military will be made with outside parties. So the military will not be responsible for policing themselves, essentially, when something like this is reported. And that's just a huge kind of thing because this case is terrible that it happened to her. She reported it to her superior officers and they did nothing about it. So something like this is huge. And it's just something that needs to be spoken about. And we need to, celebrate when good things like this happen that, hopefully the right thing will be done. God forbid this happens in the future to somebody.
Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of people don't even realize when you look at numbers and statistics, it's like, wow, you see how much more sexual harassment, rape, forceful touching, all of that. It happens a lot more in the military than it happens in, the general population. So this is obviously a problem there. Yeah. So for Biden to have taken the steps to say, we can't let you guys police yourselves because you've been sweeping this under the rug for too long. Sure. And this justice needs to be served is like applaud. Yeah. But I think also this kind of calls into question really undoing a lot of the toxic masculinity that exists within like the Western Hemisphere and all cultures of the Western Hemisphere. Absolutely. We shouldn't even have to be passing these types of laws. Like women should be able to go into the military and not feel like I might get raped and killed. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, absolutely. Or even the case with the young girl in Florida, I'm forgetting her name, where the maintenance man raped and killed her. Right. You know what I mean? We should be able to feel safe in these spaces. And a lot of that has to do with undoing like that toxic masculine culture that feels as if they need to dominate over a woman. Yeah. And unfortunately, that also bleeds into the police's responses to a lot of these cases, because sexual, assault, harassment, most of it goes unreported, but even the ones that do go reported, most of them go uncharged. You know what I mean? Like the police aren't super helpful in that. And there definitely is a bit of that toxic masculinity, that you speak of that happens within there. You know what I mean? Whether it's like trying to insinuate that the woman was asking for it or something like that, these are all common narratives that we hear and that we, unfortunately, as a culture have accepted as normal, right? Like as normal things that are okay to say in these cases, rather than actually, policing, the men who are committing these crimes and teaching our boys not to do these things. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot that needs to happen. And I hope that this is just like the beginning of that. I mean, I would love to see, like a special kind of outside of the police force type of units that handle just specifically these types of cases, that really give women a fighting shot at getting justice, when they've been unfortunately victimized at the hands of a man. Yeah, me too. And it starts really with us, like you said, because even there are certain like things that happen within dating that is like OD violation. Like there have been instances this year where I've like been dating someone and maybe, hung out with them after a certain hour, they would assume that, something was going to go down and they would force themselves on me. And I'm like, first of all, don't get punched in your face. You know what I mean? But like it's just so crazy that these assumptions exist and they're normalized in dating culture.
Right.
And that really also needs to start being dismantled. There needs to be much more specificity when we talk about consent and these things. And I just wish there wasn't so much pushback. Because, for instance, like I remember I put up a post. I don't like being called sexy by anybody who I'm not having sex with.
Sure.
Don't call me sexy.
Right.
Like, I don't like that. And you had to see the comments of the men in my post saying like, oh, now sexy's not a compliment. Oh, you feminists are crazy.
Sure.
And going crazy over this. Instead of just respecting that, I feel like when you compliment me with this word, you are sexualizing me. And I would prefer for you not to use this word and just to respect that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's self-explanatory.
Right. It seems like it should be a very simple lesson. Unfortunately, as men, we weren't given the proper role models. You know what I mean? We weren't taught these things. We weren't having these important conversations, you know, and it just created generation upon generation of men who act in certain ways. And, you know, I mean, listen, I've had to have reckoning with myself of different, you know, things that I learned growing up or had from friend groups and things like that just is inappropriate when you're talking about interacting with a woman, you know. But yeah, it definitely takes men having to be open and being, you know, understanding that you're not necessarily under attack, but you have to understand that there has been so much things that we have normalized that just are incredibly toxic and lead to women feeling unsafe, you know? And it's just, you know, again, like you said, starts with these types of conversations. And I think, you know, for any man out there who likes to claim that, you know, somebody like yourself is being too woke with something like that, I think you have to just put your guard down for a second. And again, that word empathy, and think about, where is this person coming from? Like, why do they feel that way? Why is this such a trigger? Why does this make them feel uncomfortable? You know, and I'm sure, you know, there's plenty of reasons why you could give them, you know, that interactions you've had with men in the past, or whatever the case may be, as to why something like this would make you feel uncomfortable. And it just begins with being open to conversations and understanding that just because we were taught something growing up doesn't mean that it's, you know, it's the fact that can never be changed. You know what I mean? We were taught a lot of things that aren't right, and we have to kind of do that work on ourselves to kind of undo some of those toxic things we've been taught generationally.
Yeah, definitely. And just to say this, because somebody's going to say something. I think it goes both ways. I think when women sexualize men, that's also not right.
Right. Yeah, or even
I know
like
some women that be sliding in my homeboys' DMs, because I have a lot of celebrity homeboys, and the DMs be wild crazy.
Yeah, like, or even the idea of like, like, oh, you're a man, suck it up. You know what I'm saying? Like, that idea creates a lot of toxic masculinity, because this idea that we have to always be tough, we can't be vulnerable, and then we begin to compensate for that by acting out and doing stupid things. You know, so yeah, it definitely does go both ways, and I appreciate you kind of bringing that point up as well. I think both sides, both men and women, have to kind of do some work on ourselves and some of the things that we've been taught, and undo some of those teachings that are wired within us.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? It starts with a conversation. But listen, I want you to touch on your show, Blacktinidad. Let people know what that's about. I know you've been working hard on that for the last year or so, if I'm not mistaken. So what's the deal with the show for people who haven't tapped in yet?
So the show Blacktinidad is kind of what it sounds like. Yeah. Black Tinos. And really the whole point of the show was to educate and to amplify Black stories. Mm-hmm. And I am a person of mixed race who obviously has a significant amount of African ancestry. I'm Latino, and I've had issues, not necessarily on the East Coast, because there's a lot of us over there, but on the West Coast with people not acknowledging my Latinidad. And then also being a dancer and an actress, being in spaces where I wasn't seen as Latino. I was just either ethnically ambiguous or Black. And nothing wrong with being Black, but when I would look over in a lot of like the Latino spaces, I see the street of European dancers there with dark hair and olive skin. And I'm like, why are these French girls in the space that should be for the women like me? And then also I would see that there would be no Black, or maybe one tokenized Black representation in the Latino spaces in dance. And so we started this show because a lot of people don't recognize Blackness in Latinidad and how important of a role it plays in the culture. How many heroes we have that are like Black Latinos, or how much we overlook Black Latinos, even in media, and just associate them with Black American. And really just educating people on these stories and these experiences, so that we go back to that word, so that empathy can exist within us as a culture, to realize that the Black experience in Latin America is something that needs to be acknowledged. And these issues that happen in Latin America in race, the ones that we like to ignore by saying like we are these three races, or we are one race, or we don't see color, can kind of be dismantled, so we could really, really work on the issues that still are existing and be that one race that we claim to be.
Sure. I love that. Very well said. On LATV, of course. Where can people follow you if they want to catch up with you too?
You can follow me, Melany Moves, on Instagram. Melany's with a Y, Melany, Moves is with a Z, Movez. So Melany Moves on Instagram. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Don't follow me on Facebook because I'm not going to follow you back. On Twitter, I don't tell nobody my Twitter. I got an incog name on Twitter so that I can talk and be reckless on Twitter.
Okay.
So like some Twitter either. Just find me on Instagram.
I love it. Listen, it's been a pleasure getting to reconnect and have you here on the show. And of course, wishing you nothing but the best.
Yes. All right. Peace out.
All right. Take care. Man, big shout out to LATV family right there, Melany, for hopping on the show. Make sure you check out Blacktinidad right here on LATV. And with that said, man, before I get out of here, as always, I want to leave you with some positivity. Now, of course, the positivity comes in the form of a quote. This week, the quote comes to us from Alfred Adler, and he says, quote, "Empathy is seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another." And it just felt super, super relevant based upon the conversation I was having with Melany. It felt like empathy was our kind of golden word for the conversation. And I just think that, man, the world right now is in such turmoil, specifically when you're talking about this country, or even when you talk about our community, you know, like Melany and I were talking about. We all are just having trouble seeing one another's point of view, or wanting to be open to one another's point of view. And that requires empathy. We have to be able to humanize one another, see the beautiful human being in each other. And that's the only way we can kind of have these really tough conversations, and not necessarily ones that we all have to agree upon, but we at least are able to not be fighting, because we can be open to hearing the other person's point of view, to hearing their story. And that allows us that camaraderie that we're looking for. And that allows us that the ability to live side by side in a way that is not harmful or detrimental to people. Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning into the first episode of the new year. I'll be back next week to do it all over again. Until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.